Welcome to the National Institute for Early Education Research 2021 State of Preschool briefing. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. I'm Steve Barnett, and I'm joined by Allison Friedman-Krauss, Assistant Research Professor and lead author of the report we'll discuss today. We also have four guest speakers: Health and Human Services Secretary Javier Becerra, Education Secretary Miguel Cardona, West Virginia Governor Jim Justice, and Katie Walden, a stay-at-home mother of 3 children from North Carolina. Following our speakers, we'll have a question and answer time. NEAR produces the State of Preschool yearbook annually because high-quality preschool is one of the best investments that America can make in its children and families. Done right, it can enhance children's learning and development, their current and future success, and support parental employment, especially for the most disadvantaged. Unfortunately, access to high-quality preschool is low and highly unequal. Before continuing, I'd like to thank Heising-Simons Foundation and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation for supporting this survey and the report. The survey we discussed today is for the 2021 school year, the first to be fully impacted by the pandemic. We focus on 3 key areas: enrollment, funding, and 10 policies to support quality. We also look at trends over the past 20 years and highlight progress or lack thereof over 2 decades. For the first time in at least 20 years, enrollment declined. The pandemic erased an entire decade of progress in enrollment. Health risks, closed classrooms, and remote preschool disrupted an already fragile system. Parent surveys reveal that disadvantaged children were the most negatively impacted by declines in enrollment. We also see inequality across the states. In some states, more than 70% of 4-year-olds attend a public program. In others, this is less than 15%. Leaders in states serving high percentages of their children include both red and blue states. It's not a partisan issue at the state level. Earlier, I spoke of benefits from preschool done right. Inadequate policies for quality were a serious concern prior to the pandemic. The pandemic-related disruptions and restrictions made the situation worse. Many states slipped on quality improvement systems. Finally, let's turn to funding. States did a remarkable job supporting their programs despite the pandemic, but federal pandemic relief funds played a key role in enabling them to do that. Despite this, funding remains far short of what is needed. Spending per child has not changed in 2 decades, adjusted for inflation, hovering just below $6,000. That simply is not enough for high-quality, full-day programs that adequately compensate teachers. Now I'm going to turn it over to Allison Friedman-Krauss to present more detailed findings from our report. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. So as Steve mentioned, I'm going to go over some of the detailed findings from our 2021 yearbook. So like last year, 44 states, DC and Guam have a state-funded preschool program, but new for the 2020-21 school year, Michigan's developmental kindergarten and Washington's transitional kindergarten are included in the report. As Steve mentioned, both red and blue states continue to be leaders in preschool access, spending, and quality, reflecting bipartisan support in the states for publicly funded preschool. State-funded preschool programs reached almost 1.36 million children, including 1.15 million 4-year-olds. This is about 29% of 4-year-olds in the country and less than 5% of 3-year-olds. Enrollment in preschool this year decreased by 18% and decreased in all but 6 states. We saw decreases in Head Start enrollment and special education enrollment as well. Only the District of Columbia served more than 70% of 4-year-olds, and only the District of Columbia served more than 50% of 3-year-olds this year. In a typical year, there are more states serving over 70% of 4-year-olds. Most states provided at least a school day program, which we define in the yearbook as at least 4 hours per day. So most states provided the school day program to most children, but there's wide variation, with some states only providing 2.5 hours a day, 10 hours a week, and other states providing 7 hours a day. State funding for preschool was $8.98 billion, which is an inflation-adjusted decrease of 3%. States use about $440 million in federal pandemic relief funding to support preschool. And across all sources of funding used to support preschool this year, it amounted to $10.94 billion. State funding for preschool, however, did decline in 26 states, primarily as a result of enrollment declines. But there were 9 states where there are substantive increases in spending, including an $84 million increase in Maryland and a $78 million in New Jersey, 2 states that are committed to expanding access and committed to high quality programs. State funding per child this year was $7,011. Given the drop in enrollment, however, this likely is inflated above what states would have spent if programs were filled to capacity. So we calculated a more accurate metric to compare this year to other years, which is our spending per full enrollment equivalent, which accounts for states' capacity. This figure was $5,867, which is a $240 increase from the previous year. Alabama, Mississippi, Rhode Island, Hawaii's Executive Office on Early Learning's public pre-kindergarten program, and Michigan's Great Start Readiness Program are the only 5 programs to meet all 10 of NEAR's quality standard benchmarks. Kansas, Utah, and Washington all had policy changes to meet an additional benchmark this year. We continue to see wide disparities among states, resulting in growing inequality in access to high-quality preschool. Only 11% of children are in preschool program. Only 11% of children who are in preschool programs are in programs that meet 9 or 10 of our quality standard benchmarks. On the other hand, almost 40% of children in state-funded preschool are in programs meeting fewer than half of the benchmarks. Every state other than Hawaii has a mixed delivery system, allowing preschool children to be served by private providers and Head Start, as well as public schools. The details and percentages of preschoolers in public schools vary greatly by state. And now I will turn it back to Steve.
So we are now joined by Secretary Javier Becerra, and I will briefly repeat the introduction that prior to becoming Secretary of HHS, he represented Los Angeles in Congress for more than a decade before he became Attorney General for the state of California. And he oversees most of the federal government's investments in early learning, birth to age 5. Thank you for joining us, Secretary.
Dr. Barnett, thank you very much for including me. I'm pleased to be joining you with Governor Jim Justice, West Virginia, and my dear friend and colleague, Secretary Miguel Cardona of the Department of Education with you today. To everyone at the National Institute for Early Education Research, thank you for what you've done over the years to give us the glimpse, the pulse of education, early education over the past 2 decades. Without that work, we'd certainly be further behind than where we should be. And I know that you're looking forward to seeing your work used so we can catch up to where we really ought to be. I think many of us know that the pandemic has set us back. Certainly those parents who found it very difficult to school their children, provide them with the care they needed during the day. Certainly for all those teachers who were uncertain of the conditions under which they would have an opportunity to educate children. And for all of us in America who believe that we need our next generation to be ready to not only learn, but to lead, it is critical that we learn from what the pandemic has taught us to move forward. I want to give a quick salute to President Joe Biden for having pushed so hard for the American Rescue Plan, that $1.9 trillion investment in America, not just to tackle COVID. And here at HHS, we use many of those resources to tackle COVID and be successful to the point where we are today. But everything he did to keep so many of our care providers, child care providers, our educators afloat during a time when it was difficult for states to be there. I think it was crucial that the president pushed so hard for the American Rescue Plan, which made possible the kinds of investments that have left us now at a point where we can get our kids back to learning full time. But we know that things aren't where they should be. We know that by the age of 6, a child's brain has matured dramatically. And we know that we must do everything possible to just infuse that mind with as much knowledge as possible before they get to kindergarten age. I say that not just as the Secretary of Health and Human Services, not just as someone who had a chance to be the first in his family to get a 4-year bachelor's degree. I say that now as a father of 3 tremendously successful daughters who are now adults, who had a chance to go on through college. And I will tell you that giving them a chance to have early education, because my wife and I could afford it, was a luxury that should become a part of the rule for everyone in America. Because having grown up with parents who never got to go to college and worked hard all their life to pay, I know how much of a difference it makes to have access to early childhood education. I was what was then called the Latchkey Child, where my parents were both working when I got home. They could not afford to offer us daycare services while we were growing up to get to school or even after school. But we were fortunate. We had very caring parents and a large family to help us out, and we got through. But not everyone has those luxuries. And so I think, Dr. Barnett, we know that this is a time when we can move. And I am so thrilled to be able to work in partnership with Secretary Cardona. We have agreed as members of the President's Cabinet that our 2 departments have to weave together much of what we do. So we're a unified team working together. And we've done some things already that have made that possible. So I hope that what we can do is just build on that success of making sure that we are treating every child like our own. And so that collaboration with the Department of Education, where in the previous, previous few months, we were able to co-host a webinar on a student loan forgiveness program for early educators. So if you want to be an educator, we want you to know that there are loan forgiveness programs available to you. That webinar was viewed by over 1,400,000, or had 1,400,000 unique views. So we hope we got a whole bunch of future leaders and educators watching. We're going to continue to do things like that because we know how important it is to make sure that we make that care and education for our kids available to all. So with that, I want to simply say, Dr. Barnett, please continue to give us the facts, give us the data we need to make the right calls, and continue to lead in ways that allow Governor Justice and Secretary Cardona and I to make a difference for all families, and hope that every child, like our own children, have an opportunity to succeed. With that, why don't I turn it over to Secretary Cardona?
Thank you, Secretary Becerra. Just a brief introduction for Secretary Cardona, our next speaker. He began his career as an elementary school teacher, served as a principal of a school with a high-quality preschool program for 3- and 4-year-olds. He knows firsthand from the experience of practice what we're talking about here today and why it's so important. Secretary Cardona.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Steve, and thank you to the National Institute for Early Education Research for hosting today's session. And Governor, thank you for your leadership. I'm really pleased to join my cabinet colleague, my colega, Secretary Becerra. He's absolutely right. It's time now that we remove silos at the federal level to work together. We're serving the same families, and I know in Secretary Becerra I have a partner to help outside the box and really support the field the way they need to be supported. And thank you to NEAR for making that possible. Today we're here to talk about the importance of preschool. As a former principal, as was mentioned before, we had a program for 5-year-olds. I can tell you preschool matters. As a former elementary school teacher, I can tell you preschool matters. As a parent, I can tell you without a doubt, preschool matters. But you don't have to listen to me. There's tremendous evidence that the strong start provided by quality early childhood education has a range of long-term benefits for our children, both inside and outside the classroom. The evidence is there. We've been talking about following the science for the last 2 years. Let's follow the science on what our youngest learners need. Children who attend high-quality preschool, they're better prepared socially and academically for kindergarten success. They're less likely to repeat a grade. They're more likely to graduate from high school and college. They're projected to earn more money as adults. The list can go on and on and on. I don't have to tell this group, you know this. Preschool should be available for everyone, but right now it's not. We've made some strides as a nation, but we still have a long way to go. Before the pandemic, the nation reached 44% of 4-year-olds and 17% of 3-year-olds enrolled in publicly funded early learning programs. But we know many families just can't access or afford high-quality, full-day preschool programs. This is especially the case for children from low-income families and children of color. We must close these gaps. Unfortunately, we also know the pandemic made things more challenging. Enrollment fell dramatically and state spending decreased across the board. Even if we fully rebound, we're not where we need to be. It's unacceptable to go back to where we were in March 2020. Our littlest learners need more. I want to give credit to NEAR for laying these facts out boldly in their latest state preschool yearbook. It paints a picture of where we are today, but also gives us hope of where we can be tomorrow. A few states, like West Virginia, offer all 4-year-olds high-quality, full-day preschool and are well-positioned to serve all 3-year-olds. The state preschool yearbook lists 10 more states where preschool for all 4-year-olds is within reach. And it sets out the cost for all states to reach every child in a low-income family. That's an incredible roadmap. And let me tell you, as a practitioner, this is what the field needs. They need real facts, real time, where it could be used to move state legislators, where it could be used to move local districts. So thank you, NEAR. For our part, the federal government is working with states and communities to support preschool services for all children, including and especially children living in high poverty communities and children with disabilities. Thanks to Secretary Becerra's leadership, we're expanding access to Head Start and early Head Start programs. We're advancing access to developmental screenings, and we're increasing the reach of which are proven to improve school readiness and help mothers and the president also wants to cap the cost of childcare 7% of a family's income. Imagine that. It cuts the cost of childcare in half for so many families. Moving forward, we're going to continue to fight and learn from the field. You teach us so much. Today, I want to issue a call for all children to enter kindergarten ready for success. Working together in close partnership with our colleagues at HHS, with NEAR, and with every early learning advocate, I know we can answer the call. Investing in early education is investing in our kids, and our kids are our future. Thank you for the time today, and keep up the great work.
Thank you, Secretary Cardona, for those inspiring words. Next up is Governor Jim Justice of West Virginia. Governor Justice is an ardent advocate for children, and that's reflected in his personal commitment to serve students and families as a coach, a mentor, and a friend. And also in his role as governor, he understands the vital role that education plays in the growth and advancement of West Virginia. And that's why he supports investments in our youngest learners, including West Virginia's outstanding support of universal pre-K. We thank him for his commitment to early childhood education. We're pleased to have him with us today to recognize the work that West Virginia's done as a national leader in preschool education. Governor Justice.
Steve, thank you so much. And thank you, Secretary Becerra and Secretary Cardona, for being with us today and offering up their really good words of wisdom. But let me just make this really, really simple from my standpoint. In my first State of the State, I said, we've got to make education in West Virginia our centerpiece. We've got to let education in many ways drive our entire economy. Now I know for decades now, West Virginia has been one of 6 states that have led the way as far as this early, childhood learning. It is so important. It is just off the chart how important it truly is. With that, I'm really proud. But I would just say just this, to all the other states out there, just think for just 1 second. Of all people, of all states, West Virginia is one of your leaders. Now, there's so much more that we can do as far as education in this nation. It's off the chart. But with West Virginia being one that was willing to step up when things were really, really, really tough in West Virginia, a state at that time that many thought was looked on as poor or backward or whatever it may be. But with all of that, West Virginia still stepped up at that time too. Today, you know, West Virginia has now become the diamond in the rough that everybody missed. We've all know what this pandemic's been like. It's been terrible, has it not? And you see, I don't speak to you from notes. I'm speaking to you from my heart and with passion. And I'm going to tell you just this. If you have that passion, if you have a real life commitment to our kids to see that we're going to make it better and better and better for them, we'll get there. We've got real work to do, and we're going to have to absolutely buckle up and absolutely just go forward in a really aggressive way to continue to do that great work. And you had two great secretaries that spoke to us earlier. And to be perfectly honest, and I've said it 1,000 times, I don't care if you're a Republican, a Democrat, an independent. First and foremost, we're Americans, and we need to be constantly doing the right thing for America. Now, with all of that, you know, there's challenges all across the globe, especially right now. But with that, everybody should be pulling the rope in one direction. The idea of throwing food, you know, having a food fight and throwing rocks back and forth at one another, that's not in my makeup. That's not in Jim Justice's makeup at all. At the end of the day, I just want goodness for our kids and for all. I'm really, really proud to be a part. Just a small part is all I need to be. I absolutely, you don't have to ever even worry or think about me for any time period whatsoever. If I tell you something and I tell you it's a 7 today, when you come back in 3 or 4 weeks, you won't get a political answer. It'll be a 7. Now, I'll make mistakes, but I'll always tell you the truth. And absolutely, I am committed beyond belief to do any and everything I can possibly do to make education better for all of our kids, as well as our teachers, our service personnel, and all the great people that are making it happen, just like the people that just spoke with us and everything. So congratulations to all of you. And if I can be that catalyst, if I can be that grain of sand that tries to make it better and leads others to come along and pull the rope with us, I'll be glad to do it anytime. Nevertheless, I thank you so much and really proud of you. And we just, if we keep that passion, we're going to get there. You know, it's been tough. I mean, like I said, the last couple of years have been tough stuff, and it's set us back. There's no question it set us back, and God knows it's been tragic for family after family after family. But we're going to get through it. We're going to get there. Thank you all in every way.
Thank you, Governor Justice. And now, finally, we're going to hear from a parent, the perspective of a parent of a preschooler, Katie Walden of North Carolina. Thanks for joining us, Katie, and for being willing to share.
Thank you for having me. I just want to say thank you for this opportunity to share our story. My name is Katie Walden. I live over in North Carolina, and currently I'm a stay-at-home mom of 3 children, ages 9, 7, and my youngest will be 4 next week. And obviously, to say that the last 2 years has been a challenge is a gross understatement. And I would even consider our family to be one of the luckier ones during the pandemic. The inequality gap that has grown exponentially because of COVID is scary. But now is the time for us to start taking steps to closing that gap. I mean, I've read countless stories of all of the progress that has been lost, years of progress in wages and in early childhood education that has been completely erased by COVID. And aptly today, my son's very, very part-time preschool closed for the day. And today was going to be the time that I was going to take notes and jot down what I was going to really dig into. And I couldn't really have scripted that any better. When we moved to Garner, which is about 15 minutes outside of Raleigh last Thanksgiving, we lost access to the only full-day preschool program that was semi-affordable in the area. We started looking at centers around here, and we were met with places that had a 6-month-long wait list that had astronomical costs. A lot of places in which the care that was provided, I wouldn't actually consider to be quality. Centers that had overworked and understaffed providers. And it just became very clear for our family that I was going to have to stay at home and close the business that I opened in 2020 because there were zero options for us. Zero options for a family that was living right outside our state's capital. We're still trying to figure out how to make one income work. My husband makes about $50,000 a year after taxes. So obviously we are living paycheck to paycheck. We rely on Medicaid and have been blessed with some help from our family. Otherwise, I don't know how we would have been able to make it. What would universal preschool mean for us? The possibility of escaping from Medicaid, a second income, and space for us to be able to breathe again. Right now, the preschool program that Jude is able to attend is only Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday from 9 until 1. And we're only participating in that 2 weeks of the month because of the grace of the owner that is allowing us to not have to pay for the entire month because it just wouldn't fit into our current budget. And that's a budget that keeps us up, mostly me, at night, figuring out, can we afford enough produce this week because of the rising cost of food? Can we have Jude's birthday party next week, or do we need to move it to another week? And crap, our car insurance is due to be renewed next month. It's really hard for so many of us, and the pandemic really has humbled us in ways that I really didn't want my children to experience. You know, most of our grocery shopping is done at Aldi, and my kids, know what it is to put food back that's already been on the belt. I think that losing the ability to work due to childcare issues, we have just trying to figure things out. And I know that what's going to end up happening because of me putting my career on hold, I'm becoming more and more irrelevant in the workplace with each passing month. It's going to make it very difficult when Jude finally starts kindergarten next year for me to find a position that is equal to my experience. And mainly that's because what's happened in this gap is I've been a stay-at-home mom, and that's not recognized as a complex and skilled position by so many companies. So not only are we behind financially this year, when I do finally enter the workforce again, we're going to be behind even more because the income that I'll be earning at that point is not going to be commensurate with my experience. But on a bright note, my background in early childhood education means that Jude will not be behind his peers when it finally comes time for him to attend kindergarten. But most other children are not that lucky. Prior to 2020, I provided affordable care to families in and around the Triangle area. They were working crazy hours, 3+ sources of income, and they were paying more than rent or mortgage for childcare, and they just couldn't do it anymore. The cry for universal preschool can be heard at every playground, in every single mom's group, and other struggling parent groups on Facebook and beyond. The pandemic has caused so many families to be without quality care for their children, and I live in a place just like so many others where companies are begging for employees. But how can we return to work or keep current positions when we don't have affordable quality care for our children? A few months ago, I spent every single day searching for centers for Jude to attend and trying to make a sound financial plan that included his tuition, before and after care for my older two, and what transportation would look like. But there was no scenario in which it would be profitable for me to keep working right now. There were no viable options for us. And there are no viable options for the majority of American families. The United States provides adequate early childhood education for an abysmally low number of its families. And when I see other harrowed caregivers at the library or grocery store, we always give each other a knowing look that says that this is just all too much. So many people have given up screaming about inequality and lack of basic support from our government. And for those families, I will continue to shout for change and teach my children to do the same until this country decides to take care of her families. Universal Preschool would change the outlook of our economy, raise standards of living for the 99, set our most vulnerable children up for success, and relieve an ever-growing burden on families like mine that just need a little help. And I really believe it is time for underserved and underrepresented families to thrive and not just survive. And I just want to thank you again for this opportunity, to NEAR for all of its work, and for our representatives that are willing to make a change and that are willing to put our children first.
And thank you, Katie, for being willing to share with us. I know this is not an easy thing to do. And yet I hear from parents all around the country stories very much like you, the mom in Texas who says, my son has to stay at home with his grandfather who doesn't speak English because we don't have a choice. If our family's going to move ahead, I have to work. The mom who wrote and said she moved to Jersey City from Pennsylvania because her husband died, and literally she had no way to support her family where she lived. Moving to Jersey City with 2 preschoolers, she had free, high quality, full day programs beginning at age 3. But it shouldn't matter what your zip code is in terms of your ability to support your family.